Kara Benson sat alone in the observation deck of her starship, the silver panels of the room reflecting faint streaks of starlight. She adjusted the controls of the tracking console, her eyes scanning the endless display of star systems and signals. Months had passed since the Council had given her this mission, and yet the human she was chasing, Ethan Parker, had somehow stayed ahead of her every move. She had read reports of humans before. They were called unpredictable, clever, and stubborn, and that had been true in her experience. Ethan was no exception. He moved through the galaxy like a shadow, leaving only faint traces behind, almost as if he wanted to be found, but on his own terms. Kara's fingers tapped lightly on the console. She had tracked hundreds of ships before, captured fugitives and smugglers. But this human was different. Every calculation, every strategy she tried seemed to fall short. Her communicator beeped, interrupting her thoughts. "Kara, any progress?" The voice of Commander Hall from the Council's command station crackled through. "I have a partial lead," Kara said, trying to keep her voice calm. "He was detected near the outer edge of the Tyrus sector. I'm planning a course correction to intercept him." "Be careful," Hall said. "Parker is more than a human. His actions have challenged entire species before. Don't underestimate him." Kara frowned. "I never do, sir." She switched off the communicator and leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. She knew that Parker was not just clever, he was observant. He seemed to anticipate the Council's actions, and that made him dangerous, not because he was violent, but because he could outthink anyone trying to control him. Her thoughts drifted to the first time she had heard about him. A human had supposedly stopped a whole fleet of alien raiders with nothing but a small team and improvised equipment. Kara had read every report, every intercepted communication, and every witness account. They all spoke the same truth. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and strangely fearless. Ethan Parker was the best example of that. The journey through the Tyrus sector was slow. Each system had its own hazards, and Kara had to avoid detection while still following the faint traces left by the human. As her ship passed through a nebula, sensors picked up unusual energy fluctuations. Kara adjusted her course. These signals were consistent with the ones she had detected near Ethan's last known location. He was moving again. Hours turned into days as Kara tracked him across the stars. The human's trail was not easy to follow. Some of it seemed deliberate, almost as if Ethan wanted to be found, leaving clues that challenged her thinking. She studied his movements, noting patterns that did not make sense at first. Then she realized that Ethan was testing her, seeing how far she would go to follow him. During one long stretch of travel, Kara allowed herself to rest. She entered her cabin, where the walls were lined with holographic screens displaying star maps and reports. She pulled up a report of human tactics she had studied before. Humans often used misdirection, taking indirect routes or creating false signals to confuse pursuers. Kara smiled slightly. That explained why Ethan's trail was so difficult to follow. Her rest was short. The tracking console beeped urgently. She rushed back to the observation deck. On the screen, a small, unregistered ship appeared, moving at high speed toward a remote asteroid cluster. Kara's heart rate quickened. That had to be him. She activated the ship's engines and followed. The asteroid cluster was dense, filled with jagged rocks and swirling debris. It was not a place for ordinary ships, but Kara had piloted in worse conditions. Her hands moved over the controls with precision, weaving the ship between massive asteroids. Every move she made, every adjustment, was countered by the human ahead of her. He moved with confidence, knowing the space better than anyone else could. Finally, the ship emerged into a small, shadowed corner of the system. The human ship was there, partially hidden behind a massive rock formation. Kara brought her own ship to a stop at a safe distance, scanning the area carefully. She activated the ship's communication system. "Ethan Parker," she said firmly. This is Lieutenant Kara Benson of the Galactic Council. You are ordered to stop and submit to capture." There was no immediate reply. Kara frowned. The human often did not respond, preferring to act instead. She decided to move closer, but she did not realize that this was exactly what Ethan wanted. Suddenly, small drones launched from behind the rocks, moving with incredible speed. They were not armed to kill, but they created obstacles, blocking her ship's path and forcing her to adjust rapidly. Kara realized then that Ethan was testing her once again. He wanted to see how she would respond under pressure. Her mind raced. If she wanted to capture him, she had to anticipate his next moves, not just react. Kara activated her ship's advanced sensors, scanning for heat signatures and energy emissions. Slowly, she began to predict the drone movements. She countered with precision maneuvers, weaving through the obstacles with skill. Hours passed in tense pursuit. The asteroid cluster seemed endless, each turn revealing new challenges. Kara's thoughts drifted to why the Council had given her this mission. Humans like Ethan were rare, but they represented a kind of potential that could not be controlled. Kara had to ensure that the human did not fall into the wrong hands, but she also had to follow her orders. As night fell over the asteroid cluster, the human ship finally stopped again. Kara brought her ship to a halt at a safe distance. She studied the ship carefully. It was small, designed for speed and agility rather than combat. She realized that Ethan relied on intelligence and strategy more than brute force. Kara took a deep breath. She knew that capturing him would not be easy. He was clever, resourceful, and unpredictable. But she also knew that she could not give up. She had to understand him, to match his thinking if she wanted to succeed. She activated the ship's external cameras and focused on the human ship. A figure moved inside. Ethan Parker emerged from the cockpit, standing tall and calm. He was a young man, with short brown hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see more than anyone else. Kara felt a strange mix of frustration and admiration. He was nothing like the Council had warned her about. He did not seem dangerous in the traditional sense. He was confident, capable, and completely aware of her presence. Kara spoke again, her voice firm but not hostile. "Ethan Parker, you are required to submit to Council authority. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." Ethan's response was simple, almost casual. "I do not serve the Council. I serve the people who need help. That is my choice." Kara's mind raced. She had expected defiance, but not explanation. This human was different. He was not trying to run out of fear. He was moving with purpose. Her orders were clear, but she began to understand that capturing him was not just a matter of force. It would require understanding his mind, and that was far more difficult. She watched as Ethan moved away from his ship, carefully navigating the rocks. He did not act impulsively. Every step was deliberate, every move calculated. Kara realized that he was not just surviving in space, he was thriving, turning obstacles into advantages. Kara sat in her ship, observing him. She felt a growing respect for this human, mixed with the tension of her mission. She had trained for years, studied countless species, and yet Ethan Parker challenged everything she thought she knew about humans. As she prepared to make her next move, she considered her options. She could continue the chase, follow him across the stars, and try to anticipate every move, or she could take a different approach, one that required trust, patience, and understanding. The night over the asteroid cluster stretched on. Kara watched Ethan carefully, realizing that the human was not just a target. He was a puzzle, a challenge, and perhaps even a teacher. She adjusted her ship's course slightly, preparing for the next phase of the pursuit. The hunt had only begun, and she knew that it would take all of her skill, intelligence, and patience to match him. Kara Benson had been trained to follow orders, to enforce rules, and to control situations. But in that moment, Staring at Ethan Parker across the empty space of the asteroid cluster, she understood that this human was different. He could not be controlled. He could not be predicted. And yet somehow, she felt that he was leading her towards something far greater than any mission she had ever known. For the first time in months, Kara smiled. The chase was no longer just a duty. It was a challenge, and she was ready to see where it would lead. The stars outside glimmered faintly, like distant eyes watching her and Ethan, waiting for the next move in a game that had already begun. Kara Benson followed the faint trail that Ethan Parker had left behind. He moved quickly, but she had learned to read the subtle signals that marked his path. Every small energy spike, every minor change in a planet's atmosphere, every tiny communication intercept helped her narrow down his location. It had taken her months, but she was closing in. The Council had warned her about the human's unpredictability. They said that Ethan could outthink entire fleets, and that no one could anticipate his actions. Kara had believed them at first, but the closer she came to him, the more she realized that it was not just intelligence that made him difficult to track. It was choice. Ethan did what he did because he wanted to, not because he was forced. That made him unlike any other target she had ever pursued. Her ship slid silently through a dense asteroid field. The rocks were enormous, some larger than small cities, and they moved slowly in orbit. Sensors indicated heat signatures in the area, weak and scattered, but they matched the pattern of Ethan's ship. Kara adjusted her course, weaving between the rocks with careful precision. She had piloted in dangerous zones before, but there was something different this time. She felt as if the asteroids themselves were part of Ethan's plan, a stage set for their meeting. Hours passed with no sign of him. Kara studied the sensor data over and over. She noticed a pattern emerging, a slight deviation in the energy readings that suggested he had passed this way a few hours earlier. She followed it, careful not to make sudden moves that could alert him. Ethan Parker was clever, and she knew that if he noticed her too soon, he could slip away again. As she navigated through the asteroid field, she thought about the reports she had studied months ago. Humans often used indirect paths to reach their goals. They moved in ways that seemed random, but were actually highly strategic. Kara had watched his trail carefully, and she realized that Ethan had probably intended for her to follow him into this field. Her communicator buzzed again, breaking her concentration. It was Lieutenant Mace from another Council ship in the sector. "Lieutenant Benson, we're losing track of him. Do you have a visual?" "Not yet," Kara replied, her voice steady. "I'm closing in. He's using the asteroid field to mask his position, but I can anticipate his moves." "Be careful," Mace said. "Remember what happened in the Loria sector? The human managed to escape 3 ships and an entire outpost with nothing but his wits." Kara nodded, even though Mace could not see her. She had studied that event carefully. Ethan had used the terrain, the outpost's own defenses, and psychological tactics to manipulate the pursuers. It was a classic human approach, using cleverness over strength, strategy over force. The asteroid field began to thin, and Kara saw a small, jagged planet in the distance. The sensors showed unusual energy readings near the surface. It was likely a place where Ethan could hide temporarily or gather resources. Kara adjusted her ship's approach, keeping her engines quiet to avoid detection. She landed on the rocky surface carefully, the ship settling onto uneven ground. Outside, the wind carried dust and small rocks, and the sky was tinted with the soft glow of a distant star. Kara activated her portable scanners and began searching. The readings were faint, but they pointed to a nearby cave system. Kara moved cautiously. The caves were dark and winding, full of shadows that could hide anything. She activated her lights and sensors, sweeping each tunnel carefully. She knew Ethan would not stay in one place for long, but he might leave clues for her to follow. Humans often did that, not out of kindness, but as a way to test those who pursued them. Hours passed with no sign of him. Kara felt her patience stretch thin. She had followed humans before, but this was different. Ethan Parker was patient, observant, and always seemed to anticipate her next step. She realized that the hunt was no longer just about capture. It had become a test of her intelligence, her skill, and her ability to think like a human. She paused in a small cavern, examining the ground. Tiny scratches on the rocks indicated movement, tools dragged along surfaces, and faint energy traces. Kara followed the trail, careful not to disturb it. The further she went, the more she noticed subtle changes in the cave's temperature and airflow. Ethan had passed this way recently. Suddenly, a soft light appeared ahead. Kara approached cautiously. In the center of the cavern, a small device pulsed with energy. It was unfamiliar technology, unlike anything she had seen from other species. Kara scanned it carefully. The reading suggested it was a communication device, but it was encrypted in a way she could not immediately decode. She touched it gently, and a holographic projection appeared, showing Ethan's face. "I see you've found my trail," he said calmly. "I hoped you would follow it. It tells me a lot about you." Kara's eyes narrowed. He could communicate even while moving through space. "Why do you do this?" she asked, her voice firm. "Why leave clues for me? You could escape without a trace." Ethan's hologram smiled faintly. "I want to see if you can think like a human, Lieutenant. The galaxy is full of rules and orders, but humans act on choice. You have the skill, but can you adapt?" Kara studied the projection carefully. His words were not a threat, but a challenge. She realized that the months of pursuit had taught her more than she expected. She had learned patience, observation, and adaptability. But this human was still far ahead. The projection ended, and Kara examined the device. It was designed to vanish after a short period. She took a small sample for analysis, knowing it could provide insight into his movements. She also realized that the human was watching her, learning from her actions and adjusting his strategy. As night fell over the planet, Kara set up a temporary observation point. She could see the faint glow of distant stars through cracks in the cave ceiling. She reviewed her data, trying to predict where Ethan would go next. Her calculations suggested he would move toward a nearby system with uninhabited colonies. It was risky, but humans often took risks that others would not. Her ship's sensors picked up a sudden movement outside. Kara moved carefully to the entrance of the cave. A small figure darted across the rocks, a human, moving with speed and confidence. Ethan Parker. He looked at her briefly, as if acknowledging her presence, then disappeared behind a ridge. Kara followed, careful not to rush. She had learned that humans like Ethan acted intentionally, and impatience could cost her the trail. The next few hours were a tense game of cat and mouse. Kara tracked him through canyons, over rocky hills, and into dense groves of strange alien plants. Ethan moved with skill, using the environment to mask his energy signals and create false trails. Kara adapted, using every tool at her disposal, every observation she had made, to predict his path. Eventually, she caught sight of him again, this time near a small landing platform on the edge of a cliff. Ethan was preparing a small ship, compact and fast, designed for stealth rather than combat. Kara studied him. He did not rush. Every movement was deliberate, almost as if he knew she was observing him. She activated her communicator carefully. "Ethan Parker," she said, "this is Lieutenant Kara Benson. You are still required to submit to the Council. Stop now, and this can be resolved without conflict." Ethan paused, looking at her. His expression was calm, confident. "Lieutenant Benson," he said, "I do not serve the Council. I serve a purpose greater than orders. If you want to follow me, do so. But understand this. I do not run because I am afraid. I move because I choose to act." Kara felt a mix of frustration and respect. This human was unlike anyone she had ever encountered. He was clever, skilled, and completely aware of the consequences of his actions. She realized that the pursuit was no longer simple. It was no longer about capture or obedience. It was about understanding, a test of her own abilities and perspective. She took a deep breath and watched as Ethan launched his ship. The engines glowed faintly, and the craft disappeared into the stars. Kara activated her own ship, following at a distance. The trail ahead was uncertain, filled with unknown challenges, but she felt a growing sense of determination. For months, she had tracked him. Now, she realized that the chase was more than a mission. It was a lesson. Ethan Parker was teaching her, showing her that humans could act with purpose and intelligence beyond any system of rules. The stars stretched endlessly before her, and Kara Benson adjusted her course, ready to follow the human across the galaxy. The hunt was far from over, but for the first time, she felt that the pursuit was not just about catching him, it was about learning, adapting, and understanding what made humans extraordinary. As her ship moved silently through space, Kara looked ahead at the endless stars. She knew that Ethan Parker would not be easy to find, and he would challenge her every step of the way. But she was ready. She had to be. The human was not just a target. He was a force of nature, a test of skill, and perhaps, in some way, a teacher. The galaxy awaited, full of danger and wonder, and Kara Benson followed, determined to see how far the human could take her understanding of choice, courage, and intelligence. Kara Benson followed Ethan Parker's trail across the stars, moving from one uncharted system to another. Each jump took her deeper into regions of space rarely traveled by the Council. She kept her ship's engines quiet, scanning for any sign of him. The human seemed to move without a pattern, yet Kara knew that humans like Ethan acted with purpose, not randomness. The trail led her to a small, rocky planet, its surface covered with craters and jagged ridges. Sensors indicated faint energy readings, just enough to confirm that Ethan had been there. Kara's heart beat faster. After months of pursuit, she was finally close. She landed her ship in a sheltered canyon, using the rocks to hide her presence. The human ship was nowhere in sight, but small traces on the ground suggested that he had moved recently. Kara examined them carefully. Footprints were spaced in a way that suggested a human carrying something heavy, moving with purpose. Kara activated her portable scanner and began following the trail on foot. The canyon was narrow and winding, with shadows stretching long under the dim light of a distant sun. Each step was cautious, but she felt a thrill of anticipation. She had been trained for missions like this, but never had she felt the tension of following a target who seemed to be always one step ahead. Hours passed, and the canyon opened into a wide valley. Kara's sensors detected faint heat signatures ahead. She moved carefully, keeping low and scanning for any sign of traps. Humans were clever, and Ethan had shown her that he could turn even ordinary terrain into an advantage. Suddenly, she saw him. Ethan Parker stood at the edge of a rocky plateau, looking out at the stars. He was calm, relaxed, almost as if he expected her. Kara froze, studying him. This was the first time she had seen him without the cover of his ship or the distractions of space. He looked ordinary, yet she felt an unusual tension in the air. "Lieutenant Benson," Ethan said, his voice calm. "You followed me well. I expected no less." Kara took a careful step forward. "Ethan Parker," she said, "you are required to submit to the Council. Stop running and come with me." Ethan shook his head. "I do not serve the Council. I have my own mission, my own purpose. You can try to stop me, but it will not work as you think." Kara studied him. He was not threatening, yet she felt a subtle power in his presence. He moved with confidence, and she realized that this human was not afraid of her or her orders. That realization both frustrated and intrigued her. She activated her communicator, sending a signal to her ship. Her voice was steady. "Ethan, I do not wish to harm you, but if you resist, I will be forced to act." Ethan's eyes did not leave hers. "Act all you want, Lieutenant. I am ready." Kara knew that he was not bluffing. Humans could be reckless, but Ethan was not reckless. He was deliberate, thinking ahead, calculating risks, and using his environment to his advantage. She had learned that chasing him head-on would not work. She had to think like him, predict his choices, and anticipate his strategy. The canyon trembled slightly under distant explosions. Kara turned her head to see a fleet of small drones moving toward the valley. They were council machines, designed to capture him. Kara realized then that the council had tracked her progress and sent reinforcements. But Ethan did not seem concerned. He gestured toward the drones. "See? They always follow the same plan. Rules, orders, authority, they can be predicted. Humans, we are different." Kara watched in amazement as Ethan moved quickly across the plateau. He leapt over rocks, dodged debris, and reached the edge of a cliff. The drones attempted to follow, but their programming made them predictable. Ethan led them into a narrow canyon, and with a few quick movements, he caused a chain reaction that trapped the machines in a cluster of rocks. Kara felt a mixture of frustration and admiration. He had done what she could not, and yet he had done it without harming anyone. It was clever, precise, and efficient, a perfect example of human ingenuity. She activated her communicator again. "Ethan, stop this. It is not safe." He looked at her calmly. "Safety is not my goal, Lieutenant. My goal is to act where others cannot. You can follow me. You can observe, but you will not control me." Kara realized that the confrontation she had expected, force, struggle, conflict, was not what Ethan intended. He was teaching her something, showing her the power of human choice and intelligence. She felt a growing respect for him, mixed with the frustration of being unable to assert control. Ethan moved toward a narrow passage at the edge of the valley. Kara followed, careful not to rush. She had learned that rushing would make her predictable. Humans like Ethan thrived on predictability. The passage led to a hidden cave, its entrance masked by rocks and shadows. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Ethan's small ship was docked quietly in a corner, ready for immediate launch. Kara studied it. It was compact, sleek, and filled with technology that was advanced yet practical. Ethan approached her slowly. "Lieutenant," he said, "you've followed me well. But the galaxy is changing. The Council sees rules and obedience. I see choice and action. That is why I cannot submit. Not now, not ever." Kara's mind raced. She could arrest him, report his location, and force the Council to send reinforcements. But she realized that doing so would miss the point. Ethan was not just a target. He was a challenge, a test of her own abilities. She stepped closer. "Then show me," she said quietly. "Show me why you do this. Show me what humans can do that no one else can." Ethan studied her for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. "Follow me, Lieutenant. Watch and learn." He activated his ship and began moving through the cave system. Kara followed at a careful distance. The tunnels twisted and turned, and the human navigated them with confidence. He reached a small chamber filled with equipment, energy sources, and holographic displays. Ethan moved quickly, adjusting settings, rerouting energy, and activating systems that Kara did not recognize. Within minutes, he had stabilized a failing colony network on a nearby moon. The colony had been on the verge of collapse due to a solar storm, and Ethan's quick thinking had prevented disaster. Kara watched in awe. He did not rely on brute force or intimidation. He used intelligence, observation, and understanding. He anticipated problems and acted decisively, all while remaining calm under pressure. She realized then that the Council had been wrong to think of humans like Ethan as a threat simply because they could not be controlled. He was not dangerous in the conventional sense. He was capable of extraordinary things because he thought differently, acted independently, and valued choice over rules. Ethan turned to her. "Lieutenant Benson, the galaxy is full of rules, orders, and authority, but sometimes rules fail and authority cannot act. Humans, we step in when others cannot. That is why I move, why I act, and why I cannot submit." Kara felt a shift in her understanding. She had been trained to follow orders, to enforce rules, and to capture targets. But she began to see that Ethan's actions were not rebellion. They were leadership, innovation, and courage. She nodded slowly. "I see that," she said quietly. "But why show me this? Why involve me?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because the galaxy needs more than obedience. It needs understanding, adaptability, and courage. You are capable, Lieutenant. I wanted you to see that humans are not threats to control. They are partners, innovators, and sometimes the difference between failure and survival." Kara felt a mixture of admiration and humility. She realized that the pursuit had changed her. She was no longer just chasing a human across the stars. She was learning from him, seeing the power of human choice, intelligence, and action. The tunnels opened to a hidden valley filled with alien flora and strange energy formations. Ethan's ship hovered briefly, scanning the area. Kara followed, careful not to disturb the natural balance. She felt a growing sense of respect for this human. He was clever, capable, and utterly unafraid of the unknown. Ethan landed his ship and approached a strange device in the valley. It was an energy collector, unstable and dangerous. Kara watched as he adjusted it with skill and precision, stabilizing the energy flow and preventing a catastrophic release. She realized then that humans like Ethan did not rely on rules or authority. They relied on intelligence, observation, and adaptability. That made them unpredictable, capable, and sometimes extraordinary. Ethan turned to her again. "Lieutenant Benson, you have followed me across the stars for months. You have observed, adapted, and learned. That is why I showed you this. Humans are not perfect, but we act when others cannot. That is our strength." Kara nodded, feeling a deep respect for him. She had been trained to enforce rules, to capture targets, and to follow orders. But she now understood that Ethan Parker was teaching her a different kind of lesson. One about intelligence, courage, and the power of choice. For the first time, she felt that the pursuit was not about control. It was about understanding. The human had faced her, challenged her, and shown her that there was a different way to act in the galaxy. The stars outside glimmered faintly, reflecting the vastness of space and the endless possibilities ahead. Kara Benson adjusted her ship's course, ready to continue the journey alongside Ethan Parker, knowing that the true test of skill, intelligence, and courage was just beginning. The hunt was over, but the lesson had only started. Kara Benson followed Ethan Parker through the strange, glowing valley, her ship hovering just above the rocky surface. She had spent months chasing him across star systems, but now the hunt felt different. It was no longer about capturing him. It was about understanding him, seeing what humans could do when others thought they were predictable. Ethan moved with confidence, scanning the strange energy formations around them. His fingers flew across the controls of his ship's systems, adjusting energy flows, analyzing data, and making decisions with speed and precision. Kara watched carefully, noting every move. She had seen clever humans before, but nothing like this. Ethan seemed to anticipate every problem before it even happened. "This energy here," Ethan said, pointing to a pulsating formation, "is unstable. It could destroy a colony if left unchecked. I need to reroute it safely." Kara nodded. She could see the danger. The energy readings were erratic, unpredictable, and powerful. A wrong move could cause an explosion that would leave a crater miles wide. Yet Ethan moved calmly, confidently, as if he had done this 100 times before. She followed his instructions carefully, assisting where she could. "Redirecting the flow to the secondary conduit," she said, feeling her pulse quicken. "Stable now." Ethan smiled briefly. "Good. Humans think fast, adapt, and take responsibility. That is why we survive." Kara felt a mix of admiration and frustration. She had been trained to follow orders, enforce rules, and anticipate threats. Yet she realized that no amount of training could match Ethan's way of thinking. Humans like him were unpredictable in the best possible way. The valley opened to a cliffside overlooking a small, isolated colony on a nearby moon. Sensors showed that the colony's power grid was failing. Without intervention, it would collapse under the unstable energy flows. Kara felt a rush of urgency. "We need to move quickly," Ethan said. "I can stabilize the energy remotely, but I need you to coordinate the grid systems on the ground." Kara followed his lead, activating her communicator to link with the colony's systems. She guided the engineers, relaying Ethan's instructions and making quick adjustments as needed. Within minutes, the power grid stabilized. The colony's lights flickered back to life, and the residents cheered in relief. Ethan stepped back, surveying the scene. "This is what humans do," he said quietly. "We act when others cannot. We find solutions, take responsibility, and face risks directly. That is why we survive and thrive." Kara watched him, realizing that the lessons she had learned over months of pursuit were coming together. Humans like Ethan were not just clever. They were brave, decisive, and willing to take responsibility when others hesitated. That made them powerful in a way that the Council had never fully understood. As the colony stabilized, a signal came in from the Council. Kara activated her communicator, expecting orders or reprimand. Instead, the voice on the other end was tense. "Lieutenant Benson, what is your status? Reports indicate unusual activity in your sector. Are you in danger?" Kara glanced at Ethan. He nodded slightly, indicating that she should respond truthfully. "The situation is under control," she said. "The human I have been tracking is assisting with stabilization. He is not a threat. He is providing solutions that the Council could not implement quickly enough." There was a pause. "Acknowledged," the voice said finally. "Proceed with caution. Your discretion is noted." Kara ended the transmission and turned to Ethan. "I can't believe it," she said softly. "The Council, they have never seen humans this way. They only see us as unpredictable or dangerous." Ethan shrugged. "They can try to control us, predict us, or follow rules, but humans act when it matters. That is what they cannot understand." Kara realized he was right. She had spent months trying to capture him, expecting resistance, expecting danger. But instead, she found intelligence, responsibility, and leadership in a way that no rules or orders could define. Suddenly, alarms went off on her ship. Sensors detected multiple unidentified ships approaching from the edge of the system. Kara quickly scanned them. They were heavily armed and moving fast. Pirates or mercenaries, intent on taking advantage of the energy fluctuations in the valley. "Ethan, we have company," she said. "They are armed and moving toward the colony." Ethan's expression remained calm. "Then we act," he said simply. "I will handle the approach. You coordinate the colony's defenses." Kara activated the colony's defense grid, directing energy shields and defensive turrets toward the incoming ships. She watched as the small fleet approached, calculating their speed, trajectory, and likely points of attack. Ethan moved his ship into position, using the terrain and energy fields to his advantage. He created unpredictable flight patterns, drawing the enemy ships into dangerous positions. His movements were precise, fast, and completely unexpected. The enemy ships fired, but Ethan dodged each attack effortlessly. He used energy reflections and gravitational anomalies to confuse them, turning their own weapons against them without causing harm to the colony. Kara's mouth went dry as she watched him work. Every move was calculated, every decision precise. It was a display of intelligence and courage that went beyond what she had ever imagined. The enemy fleet began to falter. One by one, their ships were forced into positions where they could not escape. Without firing a single lethal shot, Ethan neutralized the threat completely. The pirates surrendered, confused and unable to comprehend how a single human had outmaneuvered them so easily. Kara felt a mix of relief and astonishment. She had trained for countless battles, but nothing had prepared her for this. Ethan Parker had turned a dangerous situation into a victory with intelligence, courage, and strategy alone. When the threat was neutralized, Ethan landed near Kara's ship. He stepped out, calm and composed, as if nothing had happened. Kara looked at him, speechless. "You see, Lieutenant," he said quietly, "humans do not need brute force to succeed. We act with intelligence, adapt to situations, and take responsibility. That is why we survive when others fail." Kara nodded slowly, feeling a deep respect for him. She had spent months pursuing him, expecting danger, resistance, and chaos. Instead, she found leadership, courage, and the power of human choice. "Ethan," she said, "I understand now. The Council sees humans as unpredictable and dangerous. But you show that we can act when others cannot. That is our strength." Ethan smiled faintly. "Exactly. And now, Lieutenant, you have seen it for yourself. You can choose to follow orders blindly, or you can learn, adapt, and act with purpose. Humans do not wait for permission. We act." Kara felt a shift inside her. She realized that the pursuit, the months of chasing him across star systems, had not been about capturing him. It had been about learning, understanding the power of intelligence, courage, and choice. The valley was quiet now, the danger past. The colony's systems were stable, the enemy fleet neutralized, and the energy flows balanced. Kara and Ethan stood together, looking out at the stars. For the first time, Kara felt that the hunt was no longer a mission. It was a lesson. Ethan Parker had shown her what humans could do when they acted with intelligence, courage, and purpose. She understood that he was not just a human. He was a force that could inspire, protect, and lead in ways that the Council could never fully control or understand. "We should move," Ethan said finally. "There are other places that need help, other situations that require action. Humans do not wait. We act where others hesitate." Kara nodded, feeling a growing sense of determination. She had followed him across the stars, expecting to capture him, but she realized now that she wanted to follow him for a different reason. She wanted to learn, to act, and to see what humans could do in the galaxy. She adjusted her ship's course, ready to continue the journey alongside Ethan. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of danger, opportunity, and challenges. Kara knew that she had much to learn, and that the true power of humans was only beginning to reveal itself. As they prepared to leave the valley, Kara felt a sense of awe. She had spent months chasing a human, expecting a struggle. Instead, she found intelligence, courage, and the ability to act where others could not. Ethan Parker had changed everything she thought she knew about humans. The galaxy awaited, and Kara Benson followed, ready to see what humans could do when they took control, acted with purpose, and chose to make a difference. For the first time, Kara realized that the hunt was over. The lesson had begun. Kara Benson followed Ethan Parker through the stars, her ship moving silently beside his. Months of pursuit had taught her patience, observation, and strategy. But now the journey felt different. It was no longer about capture. It was about witnessing, learning, and understanding what humans could do when no one else could. The next system was dangerous. Sensors showed a cluster of unstable planets with high radiation levels and frequent storms. Few species dared enter, but Ethan moved with confidence. Kara studied him closely. His ship navigated through asteroid belts and radiation zones with ease, adjusting shields and thrusters instinctively. He seemed to know exactly how to survive in environments that would destroy ordinary ships. "Lieutenant," Ethan said calmly, "this system is unstable, but there is a settlement here that needs help. The Council will not send aid. Too risky. That is why we go." Kara nodded. She understood now. Humans did not wait for orders. They acted when others hesitated, when rules and authority failed. That was their strength. As they approached the settlement, Kara's sensors picked up damage. Buildings were cracked, power lines down, and energy shields failing. Residents were trapped inside, unable to move safely. Kara felt urgency. "Ethan, the colony is in bad shape. We need to act quickly." Ethan smiled faintly. "We act," he said simply. He directed his ship toward the settlement, using its small size and maneuverability to avoid debris. Kara followed, guiding emergency systems and stabilizing power grids remotely. The human moved with speed and precision, repairing critical systems, rerouting energy, and preventing further damage. Kara watched, amazed at how quickly he adapted to every problem. A sudden tremor shook the ground. Kara's sensors detected a massive rock slide falling toward the settlement. She tried to warn the residents, but the debris moved too fast. Ethan reacted instantly. He piloted his ship directly into the path, using energy fields to deflect the rocks safely. The residents watched in awe as he moved with speed and intelligence that no one could have predicted. "Lieutenant," Ethan said, his voice calm, "humans act when others cannot. That is why we survive. That is why we can lead when rules fail." Kara nodded, her respect growing with every action he took. She had spent months pursuing him, expecting defiance, struggle, and danger. Instead, she saw leadership, courage, and intelligence in its purest form. The rock slide cleared, but new problems emerged. Energy levels were unstable, and the settlement's main generator was on the verge of overload. Kara guided the engineers as Ethan worked with the equipment. Within minutes, he stabilized the generator, preventing a catastrophic explosion. Residents emerged from shelters, cheering and thanking him. Kara felt a deep sense of awe. Humans like Ethan did not rely on weapons or fleets to succeed. They relied on intelligence, adaptability, and courage. That made them extraordinary. As the settlement stabilized, Ethan turned to Kara. "Lieutenant Benson, you have followed me across the stars, seen humans in action, and witnessed what we can do. Now you understand why the Council cannot control us, predict us, or stop us when we act with purpose." Kara nodded slowly. She understood now. Humans were not threats simply because they were unpredictable. They were forces of action, capable of solving problems that others could not even imagine. That was why they could survive, thrive, and inspire change across the galaxy. Suddenly, sensors detected another threat. A fleet of warships appeared on the edge of the system, moving fast toward the settlement. They were armed heavily, far more than the settlement could handle. Kara felt a rush of urgency. Ethan smiled faintly. "Let's show them what humans can do." He piloted his ship directly into the path of the fleet, moving unpredictably and using the terrain to his advantage. Kara guided defensive systems, coordinating shields and turrets to protect the settlement. Ethan used the energy fields around the planets and asteroids to create obstacles, forcing the enemy ships into positions where their weapons could not reach him. The enemy fired repeatedly, but Ethan dodged with skill and intelligence. He manipulated energy flows, creating reflections and diversions that neutralized their attacks. Kara watched, speechless, as a single human turned a deadly fleet into a harmless threat without firing a single lethal shot. The enemy fleet faltered, confused and unable to anticipate his actions. One by one, their ships were forced to retreat. The settlement remained safe, the residents unharmed, and Ethan had acted decisively to prevent disaster. Kara felt a deep sense of respect. She had followed him across countless systems, expecting conflict, danger, and resistance. Instead, she had witnessed leadership, courage, and intelligence at its finest. Ethan Parker had shown her the power of human action when rules, authority, and fear could not succeed. He landed his ship near Kara's, stepping out calmly as if nothing had happened. The settlement's residents gathered, cheering, celebrating, and expressing their gratitude. Kara watched, realizing that this was what humans could do. They acted when others could not. They led when others hesitated. They solved problems that no system could predict. Ethan turned to Kara. "Lieutenant Benson, the galaxy is full of rules, orders, and authority. But sometimes rules fail and authority cannot act. Humans, we step in. That is our strength." Kara nodded. "I understand now. The Council only sees humans as unpredictable and dangerous. But you show that we can act, solve problems, and lead when others cannot. That is our strength." Ethan smiled faintly. "Exactly. And now, you understand why the Council cannot control us. We are forces of action, choice, and responsibility. That is what makes us extraordinary." Kara felt a shift inside her. She had spent months chasing a human across the stars, expecting resistance and danger. Now she understood. She wanted to follow him, learn from him, and see what humans could do in the galaxy. The settlement was safe, the threat gone, and the energy flows balanced. Residents celebrated, and Kara felt a deep sense of pride. She had witnessed something extraordinary, something that no council report could explain. Humans like Ethan were unpredictable, yes, but also capable, brave, and intelligent in ways no one could fully control. Ethan turned to Kara. "We should move. There are other places that need help, other situations where humans can act where others cannot." Kara nodded, adjusting her ship's course. She realized that the chase had taught her more than any mission ever could. She had learned patience, observation, and strategy. But most importantly, she had learned the true power of humans, choice, courage, and intelligence. As they moved through the stars, Kara watched Ethan pilot his ship with confidence and skill. He was calm, deliberate, and completely aware of the universe around him. She understood now that humans like him could make a difference in ways that rules, fleets, and authority could never achieve. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, filled with danger, opportunity, and challenges. Kara knew that she had much to learn, but she also knew that following Ethan Parker was the best way to understand what humans were truly capable of. She glanced at him, seeing determination, intelligence, and courage in his eyes. He had faced her months ago, a target to be captured, and had turned the pursuit into a lesson. He had shown her that humans acted when others hesitated, solved problems when others failed, and led when others could not. Kara felt a deep respect. She had spent months chasing a human, expecting conflict and danger. Instead, she had found intelligence, leadership, and courage beyond measure. Ethan Parker had changed everything she thought she knew about humans. "Lieutenant Benson," Ethan said quietly, "we move forward. The galaxy is vast, full of challenges and opportunities. Humans act where others cannot. That is our strength. That is what makes us extraordinary." Kara nodded, feeling a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She had followed him across the stars, expecting to capture him. But she realized now that she wanted to follow him for a different reason. She wanted to learn, adapt, and see what humans could do when they acted with intelligence, courage, and choice. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and Kara Benson adjusted her ship's course. She followed Ethan Parker, ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store. She knew now that humans were forces of action, decision, and responsibility. They could change outcomes, save lives, and lead when others could not. For months, she had chased him, expecting to capture a target. Now, she followed him as a student, a witness, and an ally. She had learned that the true power of humans was not in obedience or control. It was in choice, courage, and intelligence, qualities that could shape the galaxy in ways no rule or order could predict. As they jumped into hyperspace, Kara felt a deep sense of awe. Ethan Parker had faced her, challenged her, and shown her that humans were extraordinary. She understood now that the pursuit was never about capture. It was about understanding, learning, and witnessing the full power of human action. The galaxy awaited, full of danger, opportunity, and challenges. Kara Benson followed, ready to see what humans could do when they acted with purpose, intelligence, and courage. The hunt was over, but the true journey had just begun. And for the first time, Kara realized that humanity was not something to control. It was something to follow, learn from, and be inspired by.